My name is Homer Gaines. I am a software engineer and an accessibility specialist, and I focus on helping companies basically improve the software that they are building, their products that they're building, so that people with disabilities can also use them. And today, what I want to talk with you about is improving your products uh, through using design systems. Now, what this talk will not be, it will not be an in-depth talk about how to actually structure or build a design system, but more these will be concepts that you can apply to design systems that you may have in place, or for one that you want to get started, some rules and some guidelines that you may want to follow to kind of help smooth the process along when you're introducing accessible components. So I've already shared this link in the chat, but if you want to, you can either scan it or just visit the bit.ly link. It is bit.ly/Homer's Web Aim Talk. So jumping into it, this is something that I hear often when I speak at conferences, or even just, from teammates or leadership when I'm working with them. We don't have users with disabilities. And the reason that we hear that a lot is because when people think about disabilities, they think of the physical aspect of it. You have the gentleman here using ASL, you have the young woman with prosthetic limb, you have the woman who is blind and she's walking with her cane and her dog. And then you have the gentleman with mobility issues and he's in a wheelchair. A lot of people visualize this, or people like this, when you mention disabilities. And it couldn't be further from the truth, because as a lot of us know, not all disabilities are visible. What about the cognitive disabilities? What about the neuroprocessing disabilities? Visual. You can't tell if someone has low vision unless they actually tell you. And low vision doesn't necessarily mean that they're wearing glasses. The definition of low vision is a vision disability that cannot be corrected by using eyewear. So you're not wearing contact lenses or lenses or anything like that. But when we think about the largest part of it, when we get into cognitive, there's a range of cognitive disabilities that can affect the way that individuals interact with the products that we build on a day-to-day basis. Along with the pandemic, we have long COVID symptoms. There's attention deficit, anxiety, depression, memory loss, and the list goes on. All of these affect how someone will interact with your product at some point in time. And then when we think about accessibility, it's not just the responsibility of one particular role on a team. It's actually everyone's responsibility. But for the sake of this talk, what I'm going to do is just narrow this down to the design teams, the content teams, and the dev teams, because these are mainly the individuals who will be working on design systems and will have some form of say or guidance over how those design systems are built. So first off, what are design systems? For anyone who doesn't know, if you do not use one in your office or in your day-to-day and working on your projects, design systems basically consist of a set of rules and standards that govern the way that your components and your patterns are set up. This is the documentation that developers and content writers and designers will visit often to understand what are the rules that they need to follow in order to maintain the corporate voice, but also build the application so that it maintains the branding standard along with that corporate voice. And it's really good to start thinking about accessibility when you're building out your design system, because it can really help mitigate a lot of the issues that plague a lot of applications today. So design system here, we have Material. This is a very popular design system that a lot of teams use. Another one that's been around for a very long time is IBM's Carbon. And then we also have one which is, in my opinion, probably one of the more accessible design systems that I've worked with over the years, and it's really good, and it's Radix. And when you have a design system and its components and all its patterns, the really good thing about having a design system with these components is that all the components are reusable. It makes swapping things out easy. It makes sure that you have consistency throughout your application. But the bad thing is that they're also reusable, which means that if you build something incorrectly and you start to populate the rest of your application with it, you're going to take those same issues and replicate them over and over and over again. So basically what you end up with is garbage in, garbage out. There was a WebAIM. I'm pretty sure a lot of you are familiar with the WebAIM 1 million. Well, in 2023, part of the study showed that, there were 106,245 errors detected on a single homepage. And aside from thinking that every engineer that worked on that project just woke up and chose violence, I'm thinking that they used a design system and those components probably were built incorrectly. In fact, you probably saw something that looked like this wall that's going up. Sure, it started out with good intentions. The bricks are being laid just as they need to, but then over time, entropy sets in. And even though you have components here that actually work, if your engineers do not know how to put these components together and use them in a correct manner, yeah, you'll end up with a product, but it may not be the product that you wanted or the one that your users can even use. So we have to be mindful and set these rules in place with our design systems. This right here, ARIA first approach. This is probably one of the biggest issues that I find inside a lot of design systems that I review and use. It's because engineers will rely too much on ARIA instead of just sticking with the basics. Going back to WebAIM's 1 million, in this last one that they released, homepages with ARIA had 34.2 more detected errors than those without. And that's because we find a lot of misuse of ARIA attributes being applied to elements that they shouldn't be applied to, or just the definitions around ARIA not being completely understood. So you'll hear myself and several other engineers in the accessibility space say this: first rule of ARIA, don't use ARIA. And it's literally on the website. If you actually go to the ARIA website and visit patterns, read this first is at the top, and it states no ARIA is better than bad ARIA. Before using ARIA, read this to understand why. I'm pretty sure a lot of engineers don't read that because we see so many ARIA attribute issues that are going on. I mean, the last talk we saw with the table being set up at the end where the image and it had multiple images or multiple chairs that were there. Those chairs, those are all those ARIA attributes that had no business being there because there were enough chairs sitting at that table in the picture itself. So what we want to do is that within inside of our design system, we want to promote a semantic first approach. So what is a semantic first approach for anyone who's not an engineer? That means that we are using HTML elements as they are first. We want to build all of our apps starting with the HTML. That is the framework. That's the bones of your application. And when you start there, what you will realize is that you get a lot of accessibility wins out the gate because all of it is already built in. Instead of us having to remember all of the different attributes that need to be added, the browsers handle that for us. So it decreases dev time, and it also helps keep your code clean. So many of you saw these memes floating around during the Olympics. You had the gentleman from Turkey who didn't have any assistive tech during the shooting range match, and he actually ended up taking silver. Well, think of him as semantic HTML. He was able to do exactly what he needed to do in the Olympic trials, got a medal. Granted, he also had a partner. But you see, he comes out there, he did not need anything else to help him medal in this event. However, the gentleman who did win gold, He had ear protection on. He had specialized lenses. It was all these things to minimize distraction. Let's look at that as using Arya because he needed additional things to actually get there. So what's the point here? There are sometimes you will run into issues inside your design systems when you're asked to build a component. Our design teams will come up with a unique pattern where native HTML elements will not solve that problem. But that still doesn't negate the fact that you start with semantic HTML first. You start there, then you use Arya to help bridge the gap so that it actually works with assistive tech. So Arya first, semantic first. No, we want semantic first, then add Arya at the end if you find that you actually have those gaps. So how do we all judge all this? Well, all of us know about WCAG. WCAG 2.2, what released last October, something like that. We're aiming for level AA. That is the ground level. That is the bare minimum. I have had people come up to me and said, oh yeah, I just want to be level A compliant. I was like, then you're not compliant. You want to start, you want to think of level AA as the ground floor, actually as the basement. That's just where we start from there, And then we have the 4 sections of the WCAG: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And so what I'll do is that I'll go through each of these and I'll point out particular rules that pertain to the structure of how you can set up your design systems. That way, when anyone who is involved in the application process or the product development process, they can come read through your documentation and have a better understanding of the design that they need to do or the code that they need to write or the content that they need to write. So let's start with use of color. Use of color can be a problem in many ways because what we don't want to do is use color as the only means to convey context or to convey meaning. And from the survey that WebAIM did, we found that 81% of homepages failed contrast minimums with an average of 34.5 distinct instances of low contrast text. So we're having issues here with our content and our color to where individuals cannot perceive it if they have low vision or if they have low color vision. So what we don't want to do is just rely solely on color to convey the message itself. We see this often inside of copy. Links, for instance, links that don't have underlines, links that don't have any other type of visual aid to let someone know that it is a link. Here, we can detect or we can perceive that there is a link in this copy because the colors are separate. But what if you're looking at a larger paragraph of text and the colors are just really close together? So if someone has weak color vision, this would be very difficult for them to detect where that link is. Now, this is an example of a paragraph that I pulled from WebAIM's website. This is not an actual example of how that content is actually written. Online, it actually has underlines, but here, this is just to convey the point that it would be very difficult to read any type of link inside of body copy without those other affordances, especially here. This is probably what it would look like to someone who has weak blue color vision. The blue hues get minimized to the point to where it's almost black, making it extremely difficult to navigate or even find the link inside of this paragraph. So what we want to do, as much as it pains designers, I know I used to be one, well, I still design, but I used to be one of those designers that wanted to remove the links from everything or remove the underlines. I wanted clean, minimal look. Well, as I grew and matured inside this field of accessibility, I realized that I was actually doing a disservice to all of my users in spite of what I thought was the creative direction to go. So I made the choice to make sure that I'm putting my user first before my portfolio. So here, if you have body text, links, the minimum you could do, yes, you can have the color there, but you can't rely on the color alone. Have another affordance. Use the underline that's there. Another part of design that, was a big pain. Focus rings. We all know that we can visit sites right now, and if we are power users, or if you have a disability that requires you to use a keyboard or something else other than the mouse, when you're traversing through the UI, if they don't have a focus ring, you have no idea where to go. I come across that on a daily basis. But focus rings, we got rid of focus rings. It's so bad that outline none is baked into a lot of the frameworks, the CSS frameworks that we use. So what we have to do is that we have to rip those out. If you're going to use outline none, you have to provide a viable fallback that will provide an outline around all focusable elements so that your users are able to navigate around your application in the event that they don't use a mouse, because we all do not use technology the same way. And I hear this from designers, my design is beautiful. Yeah, but it's not accessible. That's cool. And here we have the meme where the young lady is screaming at the cat who's sitting on the other table because she just feels within her soul that she is absolutely correct in this assessment. And the cat is just calm, cool, and collected, like, no, you're wrong. Your design's not accessible. It's trash. This was me. I was on that side. I was on the screaming side. Now I'm the cat sitting over there talking about do better. But there are moments where I just can't approach it like that. It's not accessible. You got to do better. But be nice about it when you're speaking to your designers. And then when we get into color contrast, that's what perceivable. So we have different things that can affect the color contrast. So we have info relationships, use of color, contrast minimum, contrast enhance, and non-text contrast. In your design system, you can actually build in the functionality so that your designers and your developers do not need to worry or have to worry about the foreground color against the background color. In this example here, this was a design system that I helped build for a previous employer. We built that in using Sass functions. So that way, whenever anyone released anything, a new component, a new element that had a particular background color, we had a class that they would use that was an accessibility class, and it would automatically set the background as well as the foreground so that it would pass the minimum contrast ratio again throughout the entire application. And it worked wonders, because before we had done that, we had an egregious amount of accessibility issues just around color contrast alone. But by building these rules into the design system, it no longer required anyone to really think about it. Did we check for it still? Yes, we did. But we knew that once we started to build this out, that it was actually going to adhere and take those properties every place else we built it into the application. And here's an example of what low contrast can do. You'll see it here, or you'll perceive it here, or you won't perceive it. There was an engineer who worked on my team. He had been there for two or 3 years. And I remember doing a design review with him, and I was describing the UI because there was a part of the UI I could see and he could not see. Now, when I realized that he couldn't see it, I started to ask him, I said, do you have, weak color vision? He said, no. I said, low vision? He said, no. So I said, this is one of those instances where it's not necessarily a disability that can harm how someone interacts with your application. This is a situational impairment. This is a temporary impairment. Situational because of the situation that we were in, it was preventing him from seeing certain UI elements. Turns out his monitor, he had the brightness cranked up as high as it could go. And because the color or the shade of gray that was being used was so light that it actually got washed out. So imagine working on an application for a number of years, and there are UI elements that you never even knew were there because your monitor was too bright. So once we went through the calibration and fixed and color corrected his monitor, the application took on a whole new life for him. There were things that he was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And then we were able to walk through it. And then I got with the designers and we started to look at all the various hues and shades of gray that we had in the design system. We pared them down and worked with them to make sure that anytime we did use these grays, that they were a part of the decorative aspects. So that way they really didn't lend or add to the context of the layout itself, and they were not important enough for the user to be able to traverse through the application and understand what was going on. So we targeted the minimum contrast. We have two contrasts that we can target. You know, the first one is 4.5 to 1. The other is 3 to 1. To avoid confusion, a lot of times, I just instruct my designers and my developers, aim for 4.5. Yes, we know that there are some aspects of the UI that can be 3.1, but it just adds confusion, especially when you're new to the project or when people are still just trying to catch up to what's going on. Let's talk about headings. Headings is a part of Perceivable. The rules that pertain to headings, info and relationships, and then 246, headings and labels themselves, literally in the name. We handle these relationships because headings will help us structure our documents, regardless of what the application looks like. Underneath that design layer, there is a structure. That's where that semantic HTML comes into play. There is always a structure that's there. All right. So our headings and our labels, we have to make sure that they are being structured in a way that conveys the correct context and meaning as users are reading through our documents or traversing through our application's UI. There was a study by a university over in Australia where they basically asked their screen reader users how they actually navigate through their education system, how their educational website. And they found that 64% of the screen reader users there navigate their websites using the headings. So if your headings are all out of whack, it makes it hard to read. The headings should be in logical reading order. I blame old school word processors for how we actually handle headings, because in the past, we would establish our headings based on how they looked. The heading that you wanted to have the most important, it was always the largest one. And then as we got down to the least important ones, they were always smaller. Well, that size doesn't necessarily translate to the actual HTML element that's there. And so when you have individuals, when you have developers or designers who are trying to structure the content in a way, if they go solely based off of how the heading looks, you'll end up with this first line here. You'll end up with an H3, an H1, an H2, another H1, and an H5, when in reality, according to the WCAG and according to semantic markup, we should only have one H1 on a page, H2 and H3. You can have as many H2s, H3s, all the way down to H6 as you want, but you need to follow that structure. And another good practice is you don't want to skip headings. You don't want to go from an H2 to an H4. That right there, when I see that when I'm auditing someone's application, that tells me that they went solely off of how it looks. Instead, what you want to do, you want to have classes inside your design system that the engineers can apply to any of the headings. This way, they can structure the document correctly first, then apply the correct styling based off of how the designer has laid it out. That way, you don't end up with all the different hodgepodge of heading structures all over the place. So I know someone with an engineering background may be thinking this, well, how come I can't use multiple H1s on a site? You can. But here's the thing. Browsers were never developed to actually support it. And so when we have companies who are building assistive tech, they're building off of those rules. This was a rule to use an H1, multiple H1s. This was a rule that was suggested, but it was never implemented. So to try to avoid any type of issues with how the DOM gets parsed, how assistive tech may interact with the DOM, which is the document object model, which is the actual structure, the semantic structure of your website. Use 1H1 instead. And then when we get to your body copy, this is underneath understandable. And the rules that apply to it are readable, the language of page, reading level, and labels or instructions. You'll notice that there is some duplicate in here, labels and instructions. One thing that we need to keep in mind when we're writing our body copy is that literacy does not equal education. There are 54% of adults here in the United States alone that are either at or below a 6th grade reading level. Literacy doesn't mean education. You can have someone who can read and write, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they actually understand the copy and the words that are actually in front of them. So we can't assume that those of us with advanced degrees, everyone else reads at that level. 54% of adults in the United States between the ages of 17 and 64 read below a 6th grade reading level. So how do we help with this? We establish rules in our design system for our copywriters. We want them to use clear, consistent language that's appropriate for the content that's there. Keep it simple. Simple doesn't mean dumb it down. It just means speak clearly. Keep a conversational tone. Definitely be mindful of industry jargon and acronyms, because industry jargon is unique to that industry. But if you have someone who was new to that industry or just passing through, they may not understand all of the acronyms and jargon that goes on. But if you use conversational language and explain what those terms are, you have a better chance of conveying the actual message, preventing errors, preventing any other type of incident or any type of miscommunication that may arise. Quick story. I was in a team meeting, and it was one of my first times reviewing this particular product. And in the UI, I saw ETA and I saw estimated time or estimated delivery time used together. One was in one row and the other was in another row inside of a table layout. And so I raised my hand and I asked, what is the difference between this? Because following ETA and following estimated delivery time was an actual time or a date of when the product would arrive. For ETA, I got 3 different answers from 3 different individuals on that team, which means that no one had a clear definition of what ETA actually meant. They also could not agree on estimated delivery time, but yet here it was inside of the UI. This is a good example of not using clear language to establish what the actual meaning is. There was only one other person in that meeting besides myself that actually knew that ETA stood for estimated time of arrival. So if you say estimated time of arrival and estimated delivery time, they're pretty much saying the same thing. So what I suggested to the team is that we do away with ETA because it's confusing. If it's confusing individuals on the team, what do you think is going to do to individuals who are not on a team, our customers who are using the application on a daily basis? So design agreed, product agreed. Estimated delivery time is what they would use going forward. Context is very important. It's very important. It's easy to lose context when we don't establish it up front. Take, for instance, a link that says click here. We see it all over the web to this day. It's everywhere. Click here. And do what? What's the context? We're focused more on the mechanic of the action than the actual subject itself. Click here. Cool. Then do what? What am I supposed to do when I click here? In one meeting that I was in, I was explaining how you don't want to use language that focuses on a mechanic because it loses the context. And there was someone in the meeting who said, but can't they just see the rest of the sentence? Well, that's the problem. Not everyone can perceive the sentence that the link is in. or the content that comes before it, because we all don't navigate websites the same way. Take, for instance, if someone is using the rotor and they're using VoiceOver and they use the rotor menu, they're not going to see the content that comes before any of the links. So what you end up with is just a list of links that appear inside of a black box that they can traverse down and go to what they need. And so in that instance, if you had a bunch of click here's, or in the example that I have here on the screen, it's menu link, menu link, menu link, menu link, then some gobbledygook, then related post 1, related post 2. There's no actual context around what those links are supposed to do. So if you want to test yourself, if you want to test how your links actually work in your product and in your content, even in your blog posts, look at how you've had them written. Tell me more about accessibility, or tell me more about accessibility, the bottom one. Remove the content and just leave the link. Then read it back. Tell me more. Cool. Tell you more about what? Or we make the subject of the link the actual actionable element. More about accessibility. So now when your users are traversing through your content and they're using a different method of navigating through links, they will have the correct content or context for what they need to do. These are all rules that we can build into the design system so that our engineers and our designers and copywriters ensure that it's actually done correctly. And one thing that I like to leave with, I like to talk about empathy. And there are 3 types of empathy. We have cognitive, emotional, and compassionate. Cognitive empathy, this is how we understand what someone might be going through, what they may be thinking. We have emotional empathy, where we actually put ourselves in that person's place. One thing that I like to do is I like to have teams try to use their application without using a mouse at all. Now, this is not to say we are going to imitate what it's like for a blind person to use the site or the app. No, this is what it's like to use the application. This is the user experience in general. If you don't have a mouse, if you have someone who has a situational impairment or a temporary impairment where they have broken their hand, or you have someone who doesn't have a disability at all and they're just a power user, they don't like to use mice. They may be in an environment where it's not conducive to use a mouse and they're faster with a keyboard. If they can't use your application without using a mouse, that's a problem. So put yourself in that person's shoes. Experience what they actually would have to experience to be able to get through your application. And then there's compassion and empathy. After you have experienced it, after you have felt the friction and understand where those friction points are, now you want to do something about it. Now you want to make sure that you are building in those stop gaps to remove the friction. You want to smooth that out so that your users can go from point A to point B without having any problems. Now, is it all going to be perfect out the gate? No. Like Meryl said earlier, progress over perfection. Because if you start chasing perfection, you'll never get there. But you can work on it incrementally. You can get there. I have seen it done. I've done it over the years with design systems that I've built. Shoot, one product that I worked on, it took us 2.5 years to actually mitigate all the accessibility issues that were found on the first audit. Our accessibility error list our bug list went from something like 300 some odd errors down to 13. And those 13 that we had were all related to third-party content that we actually couldn't mitigate through. But once we started to establish these rules and put them into our design system, and our engineers and designers and content writers started to adopt them, we started to see these incremental fixes take hold. And many of you know Haben Girma. Well, she has this quote that I absolutely love, and it says that Ableism is incredibly limiting, and we need to be aware of ableism and all the different ways it comes into our technology. We need to be mindful of what we're doing. We need to be mindful of how we're building our applications for our users, for our readers, anyone who is ingesting it. And while I am saying all of this, and it may seem like it's only limited to the users of our application, all of this can also be applied to the developer experience, the way we work in our offices, the way we work with our teammates. Because yes, many of us have teammates with disabilities. And so just because we're building an application that works for everyone else, we should also make sure that the environment and the tools that we are using also work for those who work with us. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the conference. Thank you again, WebAIM, and all the other fantastic speakers who came before me. I appreciate it. If you would like to connect, you can scan this QR code here. It will have all of my contact information. You can also find me on LinkedIn and the socials. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Homer. So we have some time right now for some questions, and we have quite a few that have come in. There's a general sentiment of everyone just thankful for the information you presented. I think it was very informative.
Everybody's just ready to go.
So we got so there's a couple just clarification.
Yeah.
So maybe on like when you're talking about links and underlying links. So somebody was asking like, does it have to be underlined to be accessible?
All right. So when you're looking at your link, if you're only using color, you've already failed. You've already failed. However, if there is some type of visual affordance there that separates that link from everything else around it, that's a better approach. You just don't want your link to only rely on color. You can use font weight to help differentiate it from body copy. There are some links that have icons. That's cool. But the simplest way, the easiest way to do it, provide a link. Provide an underline.
And it simplifies having to worry about the hover and focus color, and it just simplifies your life. And then just to clarify on that question, they were, asking like when it hovers or focus. And the answer is before hover and focus, there needs to be something other than color.
Yes, before hover and focus, there needs to be something.
Perfect. So there's a few kind of questions on, because you were talking about, how you've built out different design systems.
Yes.
And so there's some questions if you have like any resources to point people to get started.
Yeah, so I'll post the link again. The bit.ly link, I actually have 3 links to some design systems that are there to help individuals get started. Outside of that, I kind of fell into doing design systems just by accident. I wanted to help my team out with a process that kind of took forever. And I realized that, design systems with the patterns, when you start to recognize patterns inside the UI, it was just easier to implement those and replicate them. So yes, I did start by looking at, a bunch of other things out there, and then just decided to build my own. Storybook, I'll pull that up real quick and post that link. Storybook will allow you to build a component library really quickly. Yes, you still need to, that is not the link that I wanted. Let's go to Storybook UI. Good grief, that was weird. I will place this in the link for you. This is a good place to start. Another good place to start would be if any of you are still on Twitter. I'm not calling it by the other name. If any of you are still on Twitter, you can also check for us there with the design system hashtag. Also, Gina Ann, she runs Clarity, which is a design system conference that is coming up this October. It's another great resource to pop into. You will gain a lot of information from there. But yeah, I would say start with the three links that are at the end of, you know what? I keep saying they're at the end. I can just drop them in the chat.
And while
These,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. You got others?
No, I was going to say while you're pasting those links, and so these are kind of technical resources.
Yeah.
Um, the other flip side to this question is how do you get started with the design system, with your team? How do you get buy-in?
Yeah. So getting buy-in is tricky. The first design system that I built, we had to just build it first and then show the benefit of actually having it. So that was what I had mentioned earlier, where I just kind of fell into it. So I worked for an e-commerce company, and we had 3 brands that we had to manage. And me and my team, we recognized that there were commonalities, even though each brand had its own voice. There were common parts of the application that we could templatize. Okay, cool. Well, the editor that we were using was written in JavaScript. So it allowed us to actually customize and build plugins for our editor that would spit out production ready code that anyone who wasn't a developer, say for instance, our content writers, they could actually go in and literally add the content that they wanted, save it, and it was production ready. So we templatized that. Here's where the benefit was shown to leadership. A job that would normally take one of my teammates 4 days, 4 to 5 days to complete, so Monday through Friday for one brand, we were able to minimize that work to 2 days after we templatized it and turned it into a design system. So often, if you don't already have buy-in from leadership or anyone else on the team, it becomes a side project. And it's one of those labors of love. You just have to start working on it. Then you have to show and get them convinced. Or if you're working for an organization that has already leaned into it, you're good. What you need to do now is actually just figure out how you want to build it. And so Storybook, you can start with that because you're going to have components and you're going to have documentation. And what Storybook will allow you to do is write all of these different stories that were pertain to that particular component. So content can come in and add their own story. Design can add their own story, and dev can add their own stories or add their own content to make these stories that everyone else on the team can consume. Start small. What type of UI elements are replicated throughout your application? Build those first, then start to, over time, swap them out, show the benefit of actually having it. And then when leadership is like, cool, we need a design system, then they lean in more when they actually see it actually coming. So that's usually the best way to actually get started with one.
Yeah, I like that, of finding kind of with that JavaScript editor or this thing that's repeated over and over again, find
those reusable patterns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then build on that.
Yeah. And it's not just engineering. Like I said, content definitely has their hands in it. Design, you have your hands in it. Engineering, everybody. It takes all of us to actually build these applications, and we're all responsible for the accessibility that goes into them.
And so there's 2 questions directly related to that. And so the first kind of like, how can you get those teams to work together? So they specifically said content, design, and development. They have different priorities, even if they're all trying to work for accessibility. How do you get them all working together? And then the kind of similar, I'll just throw the second one in there.
Yeah.
Is as a designer, they're trying to like, how do you advocate for accessibility for developers? So they're kind of similar. How do you get teams working together? How, you're just in this role, how do you kind of get the next role to work with you?
Yeah. So now you want these teams to work together. You will have naysayers. You will. Even in organizations that I've worked where leadership has said, we're building a design system and you will use it. You will have individuals who go, I don't want to do this, because there's this misconception that a design system is constraining. It doesn't allow them the creativity or the flexibility to do what they want. Again, it goes back to show and prove. So if you are having an issue with individuals who just don't want to go along, two routes you can take: carrot or the stick. Carrot, the carrot is take an element, add it to your design system, find an ally in a department or in a team that you can work with. If you're a designer, find an engineer that also is on your side, that also is in favor of design systems. Work with that engineer on whatever feature they may be building and have them start to incorporate, the design system in what they're doing and what they're shipping. Now you also have an ally on the engineering side who can speak to the engineers for you if you are not comfortable doing that. Engineers, you can speak to designers and show them how these components can help speed up what they are going to do, because now they don't have to worry about reinventing the wheel every time. All they have to do is provide the basic components and start to put them together to form a complete cohesive UX experience. So that's where it actually starts. It's the communication. It's not just bulldozing straight through and saying, yes, we're all going to build this thing and it's going to be great. Nope, I'm not going to lie to you. No, it's not. No, it's not. There will be times where you will want to chuck your computer. It will not always be great, but it always starts with communication. That's the carrot. The stick, if you work for an organization where leadership says, yes, we're going to do this, run it up the flagpole. Now, I don't like to do that because I like to treat everybody like they're the adults that we work with, and we can have this conversation and get through it. But if it is that much of a roadblock, then you got to take it outside of you, and it has to be something that is mandated from leadership. No, this is something that we are going to do. I've been in both in those environments. I've been in an environment where we've had someone who just was like, nope, I refuse to do it. I'm going to use material or some other. My comeback to them is, cool, then you get to answer the questions of why it's not accessible when we get sued. Then when you put that responsibility on them, it's like, oh, no, I don't want that. I don't want that smoke. So bring it back there. How do you advocate for the accessibility side of it? Tell them you're building in accessibility. Let them know that you're making life easier for the dev team. We are reducing issues. We are reducing, our liability, because we are taking care of these low-hanging fruit that could get us dinged. This is a part of another talk that I have, but, the accessibility laws are there. And a lot of companies, they sit here in the States and it's like, yes, we have accessibility rules, but they're not doing anything about it. But what they don't think about is that they also have customers and clientele outside of the continental United States. Right. And those rules are actually being enforced. Case in point, next year, June 28th, 2025, the EU is going to start enforcing its accessibility rules. What happens to your business if you have customers that are in the EU and they start coming after you? We already saw what that was like with GDPR. When the UK started to enforce, hey, this is how data is collected. Companies stateside were dragging their heels, and all of a sudden they realized, oh, it's impacting business because we're not going to be able to do business over in the UK because we don't have these data collection policies updated. Then everybody was scrambling to get it in place.
We've all seen the agree to cookies, right?
Exactly. As soon as you land on the website, what happens? Boop, boop, boop.
Yep. So what if we turn this around slightly? Because you mentioned you went from the screaming person in the meme to the cat. What was impactful in your journey? Like what helped you to get buy-in? Were there any specific things that you don't mind sharing?
See, my journey into accessibility, I don't know too many people who had the same entry point as I did. My intro to accessibility was sitting with a group of lawyers for 8 hours a day for a week in a room. That's how I learned about accessibility out the gate. And that was in 2001.
The
No, I
stick.
wasn't. Yeah, but no. It was actually educational purpose because I was new to the company, and this was actually something that was scheduled. And at that time, Flash was the thing. Everything had to be Flash. And this company hired me specifically to build Flash applications. Well, guess what? In addition to those Flash applications, I also had to provide an HTML experience for anyone who did have a disability. And so I learned that I could not launch a project with them unless it passed legal's, standards. So we had a score that had to be met. It was like a minimum score of 116 points. And it was a checklist that I had to go down to make sure that we were good. It didn't matter if marketing spent $15 million on promotion. If the project did not meet those minimum requirements for accessibility, it did not launch. And so I did that for 6.5 years. So it just became second nature, but that was also the time with Flash where, everything had to be beautiful, because when we were building Flash experiences, it was how wild can we get? But,
Yep. Someone in the chat said they're having flashbacks.
Yeah, I know. Some people hold Flash fondly in their heart. I'm one of them. And then there are others who are just like, my machine is about to explode right now because so many Flash plugins are running. So yeah, I get it. But we could also talk about Silverlight. It's not. So, it was during that Flash era where I learned that me building applications was not about how cool I could make the user interface to make my portfolio look good, because that was what it was about. It was like, okay, yeah, I built this. You had this pride in it, but it was also like this competition that we all had of who could do the most craziest UI. I remember one thing I built in Flash, the navigation changed every view that you went to.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have
not proud of that.
Hey, I was a front end developer. We've all been there. So
yeah.
So I have there's a few other questions. So you were talking about how you set up that accessibility class to find contrasting colors for everything.
Yes.
And the question, is how can you do such a thing? But I wonder if there's a resource we could point them to, or maybe high level.
You know what? All right. So the reason that I was actually able to do that, what I used was a Sass function to be able to build that out. Let me pull up the link to Sass.
Yeah, so someone in chat said a mixin. So yeah, in Sass you can do variables or
yeah. So that's what it was. And I am color contrast.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. What were you saying?
I was going to say, just so everyone's clear, when you use Sass, at the end it compiles to CSS. So in the background, you're using Sass, and then it will compile.
I can't find it at the moment. Whoever asked that question, if you reach out to me on socials, I got to track this one down. But there's tons of examples. There was this really good example that I found where this guy had already built like his own color contrast picker. And so what I ended up doing was taking his code and modifying it so that I could use it as a Sass function that would do the swap. Mainly what I grabbed from it was how he was doing the calculations of the color that was being passed. So I would feed in the color as a variable, two colors actually, the foreground and the background. Then there was a calculation based that would look at those colors, and then based on the luminosity of the background would automatically assign either the light class or the dark class to whatever the foreground was. I'll have to dig it up though. That was 4 years ago when I built that. But once we got it in place, oh my good grief, it solved so many issues and so many arguments. It's like, you don't have to worry about it now. It's done. It's in the design system. go. What is foreground? Is it the color of, okay, so sorry, yes. The background, say for instance, all right, so let's look at a button. This is a question that's in the chat. The color of the button, the background color of the button is the background. The text label that sits on the button or that is in the button, that is the foreground. So whatever color is behind, that will always be considered background, or whatever color is sitting forward facing is always going to be the foreground. So you can have a background color to the actual web page itself, or you can have a background color to your elements. But the icons, the labels, text, anything that conveys context, that's going to be the foreground.
Yeah. And if you look at like the WebAIM's color contrast tool, it's going to have foreground, background. It's the text and then the background.
So, yep.
I think
which is one that I recommend often. I like that one.
And I think there might have been some other ones in the chat too.
Oh, yeah, there's some links going.
Kind of one more question.
Yeah.
If somebody's, just getting started, and maybe they have a low budget, like lots of people are just creating their own websites, or it's not as big of a team. It's either a really small team or kind of like a solo engineer, or maybe even you're just picking a template in a CMS. Kind of any advice on how to incorporate some of this for just getting going?
Yeah, those 3 links that I shared, I will say that Ian Gainsley turned me on to Radix. I don't know if he's actually on, but shout out to Ian for letting me know about Radix, because the Radix design system is by far one of the better ones from an accessibility standpoint that I've been able to work with. I was really impressed with the level of support that they have in there. So yes, if you have minimum budget or just a solo team, you don't have a whole lot of time, you can import Radix into your project and go from there. Another one is ShadCN. Shad actually ingests Radix, but they actually add kind of like their own spin to it, but you still end up with the same level of support. So yeah, Radix is a good way to start with. Yeah, as I said it in the chat, they're primitives. Start with the primitives there, and that will take you a long way than having to spin up a full-blown team if you don't have the resources for it. However, if you do have the resources, I always advocate roll your own, because then what's actually going into the code. You can mitigate any issues, and you can actually build it the way that you need it to be, the way that it needs to be built out the gate. That way you're not falling victim to any issues that any third party may introduce. I've been on that side before, where I worked with an organization where they pulled in a third party to handle their component library. Well, guess what? The individuals who were maintaining that component library stopped maintaining it. And a lot of people had ingested it in their apps. And then someone new came around and said, I'll take over. And their first commit broke the entire thing. So imagine your whole application relying on the UI library from a third party, and it's it's end of life. That is a huge possibility. So the ones that I shared, they're larger names, they're well supported, there's a community around them. Hopefully they don't go away anytime soon, but if you do have the time and the resources, definitely roll your own or look into getting into that.